Moe's final words painted a darker picture of what really went on, especially concerning his brother Curly. Before his death, Moe finally broke his silence, and what he revealed about Curly wasn't the lighthearted story fans expected. It was painful, raw, and heartbreaking. This hidden truth changes everything we thought we knew about their bond, their struggles, and their legacy. The hidden burden behind Curly's Laugh to the Three Stooges were never just another comedy act. They were a cultural storm, an unstoppable force on the big screen whose slapstick routines became etched into American memory. At the heart of that legacy were three strikingly different men, Moe Howard, Larry Fine, and Curly Howard. Moe was the iron-willed leader, famous for his sharp haircut, sharper slaps, and commanding presence. Larry, with his frizzed hair and vacant expression, played the perpetual middleman, caught between Moe's bark and Curly's chaos. But it was Curly, born Jerome Lester Horwitz, who stole the spotlight and, in the process, the hearts of millions. Curly's arrival in the act was never guaranteed. In 1932, when Moe's older brother, Shem Howard, stepped away from the group, Moe and Larry scrambled to fill the gap. Jerome, Moe's younger brother, wanted the role desperately, but few believed he had what it took. He was shy, soft-spoken, and carried a gentle demeanor that seemed at odds with the wild physical comedy the Stooges thrived on. Determined to prove himself, Jerome went to drastic lengths. He shaved his full head of hair and his mustache, creating the instantly recognizable bald look that gave his comedic persona a jolt of absurdity. The transformation worked. From his first performance, something about Curly clicked. Audiences roared with laughter. Directors quickly adapted, and within months, he was the centerpiece of the act. Moe himself would later admit that his brother was a natural. Curly required little direction, little rehearsal. His most iconic bits, the barking like a dog, the frantic spins, the immortal nyuk nyuk nyuk, weren't written into scripts. They were born from instinct, impulses that seemed to flow through him in the moment. Filmmakers learned to keep the cameras rolling, never knowing what unscripted brilliance might appear. But Moe saw what audiences never could. Behind the whirlwind of comedy was a fragile man. Off camera, Curly was quiet, almost painfully shy. The spotlight drained him. He avoided interviews, shrank from crowds, and rarely lingered after filming wrapped. His generosity was endless, always kind to fans and crew, but he struggled to form lasting relationships. Short-lived marriages came and went, leaving him more withdrawn. Moe, as both brother and colleague, carried the burden of watching unfold. As fame pushed the Stooges into grueling schedules, the cracks in Curly's armor began to show. The work was physically punishing. Endless falls, pratfalls, and exaggerated punches repeated take after take. At first, his weariness was easy to dismiss. Everyone blamed stress. But Moe noticed more. Curly's timing faltered. His improvisations, once lightning quick, grew sluggish. He missed cues, forgot lines, and sometimes seemed to wander from the set in confusion, not angry, but as if unsure where he was meant to be. His weight shifted unpredictably, and his energy dimmed. Even when the studio lights blazed and the crowd howled with laughter, Moe saw something different in his brother's eyes. The spark that once defined him was flickering. In later reflections, Moe confessed that he knew early on something deeper was wrong. But the machine of Hollywood left no room for weakness. Contract demanded performances, and audiences demanded laughter. Moe tried to shield Curly, to protect her without letting anyone suspect a decline. Yet, with regret heavy in his voice, he would later admit, Curly gave everything he had on camera, and when the camera stopped, he had nothing left. The warning signs were always there, and Moe never forgave himself for how long they went unnoticed. So, how did laughter hide such torment, and why did Moe stay silent? The answer exposes pain behind Curly's legend. Keep watching. When the spotlight became a burden by the early 1940s, the Three Stooges had reached the height of their fame. Their shorts were played in theaters across America, their routines providing the kind of wild, unfiltered laughter people craved during difficult times. On screen, the trio seemed unstoppable, but off camera, a different story was quietly unfolding. Beneath the chaos and comedy, Moe watched as his younger brother Curly began to change. Curly was still in his late 30s. yet his body betrayed him as though he were twice that age. The man once known for boundless energy, quick improvisations, and lightning-fast reactions now struggled with the simplest movements. He had developed high blood pressure and was gaining weight at a dangerous pace. At first, the decline was easy to dismiss. A forgotten line here, an extra take there. But by 1942, the warning signs had become impossible to ignore. Moe would later recall how, between takes, Curly often sat slumped in his chair, drenched in sweat, staring vacantly as if the life had drained out of him. The brother who once filled sets with an unpredictable spark now appeared attached, both physically and emotionally. He had always been shy, but now he seemed distant, unreachable. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was as if his body and mind were slipping out of his control. On set, the changes grew painfully obvious. His speech began to slur. His once crisp stunts slowed to a crawl. Simple routines had to be adjusted so that he could stand in place, deliver his lines, and move without collapsing. Behind the laughter, Moe and the crew were forced to quietly rearrange the act around his limitations. Yet through it all, Curly never complained. He refused to burden others with his struggles. To the fans who adored him, to the studio that depended on him, and above all to Moe and Larry, he felt he owed everything. But Moe knew the truth. His brother wasn't just tired. He was sick. In later years, Moe admitted that Curly was already showing clear signs of suffering multiple strokes. His hands would shake unpredictably. Mid-sentence, his mouth would seize in strange, uncontrollable ways. Each day brought new cracks in the once unshakable performer. Still, the cameras kept rolling. Columbia Pictures had little interest in slowing down production. The war years had made comedy an invaluable escape, and the Three Stooges were guaranteed box office gold. Contracts demanded more shorts, and the studio was unwilling to let a fading star stand in the way of profits. Even when Curly's decline was undeniable, stopping was never an option. The machine had to be fed, and Moe felt powerless to fight it. Curly gave everything he had left, appearing in over 90 shorts during his career. Many of them filmed in the very years his health was unraveling. Between 1944 and 1946, his deterioration was at its sharpest, yet the cameras captured only fragments of the struggle. Fans, seated in theaters, still laughed at the antics, unaware that the man on screen was fighting a private battle with his own body. Moe, however, could not look away. Each performance felt less like comedy and more like a sacrifice. In later reflections, he carried the weight of guilt, confessing that his brother gave the last of himself to those films, not out of joy, but out of obligation. The audience roared, the studio profited, but behind every spin, every fall, every nyuk, was a man slowly dying in silence. But what hidden truth did Moe's guilt reveal? Sacrifice, exploitation, or love unspoken? And how does it reshape Curly's legacy forever? Stay tuned. Cracks in the comedian's mask, Moe Howard never hid the painful truth about his younger brother. He drank far too much liquor, Moe once admitted, and I knew the reason why. The root of that problem, Moe explained, went back to Curly's youth. As a teenager, he had suffered a gun accident that left him with lingering pain whenever he stood for long periods. Comedy demanded constant movement, pratfalls, and punishing stunts, but away from the camera, that pain never left him. Then there was the matter of appearance. For the act, Curly had shaved off his thick head of hair, a decision that made him a comedic sensation but left him deeply insecure. He felt he no longer had any appeal for the fair sex. Moe confessed. Alcohol became his crutch, a way to mask his shyness, a way to summon courage when he wanted to approach women. Behind his manic screen persona, Curly was the exact opposite. He was an introvert, uncomfortable in crowds, and rarely socialized unless he'd been drinking. And as the pressures of Hollywood mounted, his reliance on alcohol grew. His personal life reflected his struggles. On June 7, 1937, he married Elaine Ackerman. A year later, the couple welcomed their daughter, Marilyn. But the marriage dissolved in 1940. After the divorce, Curly spiraled further. His weight ballooned, his blood pressure rose, and the insecurities he carried about his shaved head only deepened. To those who saw only the laughter on screen, Curly was invincible. But Moe, watching from close quarters, knew his brother was unraveling. By January 23rd, 1945, the decline could no longer be ignored. At Moe's urging, Curly checked himself into Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara, California. There, the diagnosis was stark: severe hypertension, retinal hemorrhage, and obesity. His health forced him to slow down. That year, he appeared in only 5 shorts, a steep drop from the 6 to 8 films the Stooges typically released annually. Doctors believed he may have already suffered his first mild stroke. For Moe, the truth was agonizing. His brother needed rest, not more work. Moe pleaded with Columbia Pictures' infamous head, Harry Cohn, to give Curly the time he desperately needed. But Cohn, known for his ruthless obsession with profit, refused. Production was not to be halted. The Stooges were too valuable. To Cohn, it didn't matter if the pace of filming killed Curly, as long as the shorts kept filling theaters and Columbia's account stayed full. Author Michael Fleming would later call that decision a disastrous course of action. The first short Curly filmed after his stroke was If a Body Meets a Body. Audience noticed something was different. His movements were slower, his timing dulled. He still played the clown, but the spark was dim. In the hands of sympathetic director Edward Behrens, adjustments were made. Behrens carefully crafted scenes to protect Curly, designing routines that didn't demand as much physical strain yet allowed him to shine. Films like Microphonies, A Bird in the Head, and Monkey Business revealed a star no longer in his prime, but still fighting to perform. On set, Moe often coached him through lines, whispering cues and guiding his gestures, a heartbreaking shift for a man who once thrived on raw improvisation. Other directors, such as Jules White, took a harsher approach. Shorts like Uncivil War Birds and Beer Barrel Polecats shifted focus away from Curly, relying more heavily on Moe and Larry. For fans, the change felt subtle, perhaps a dip in chemistry, perhaps a scene that lacked Curly's usual energy. But for those close to him, it was unmistakable. Curly was suffering, and every day in front of the camera pushed him further into decline. So how did one sudden stroke steal Curly's laughter forever, and what devastating truth was Moe forced to reveal next? The stroke that stole the laughter by 1946. The decline could no longer be masked. The signs had been mounting for years. Slurred words, shaking hands, forgotten lines, but no one truly expected how abruptly everything would collapse. On May 6th, during the filming of Halfwit's Holiday, the unimaginable struck. In front of the cameras, Curly Howard, the comic genius who had once seemed unstoppable, fell to the floor, fell by a massive stroke. He was only 42. Moe Howard was there that day, and the memory haunted him for the rest of his life. In later interviews, Moe described the moment not as the day his brother's body failed, but as the day Curly's spirit died. The Curly the world adored, the whirlwind who spun across sets, barked like a dog, and could ignite laughter with a glance, was gone in an instant. The stroke left him partially paralyzed, his speech broken, his movements unsteady, and his emotions unpredictable. For a man who built his career on boundless energy and flawless timing, the cruelty was unbearable. He could no longer perform, and with that, he lost the role that had defined him, both to the world and to himself. The devastation hit Moe harder than anyone. Curly was not only his co-star, not only the centerpiece of the Stooges' success, he was his younger brother. Moe had spent years watching the warning signs pile up, watching Curly push his body far beyond its limits, and now he had to live with the consequences. But in Hollywood, there was no pause for grief. Columbia Pictures demanded the show continue. Contracts, profit, and audience demand carried more weight than human suffering. To fill the gap, the studio turned back to Shemp Howard, Moe and Curly's older brother, who had left the act in 1932. Shemp returned in Curly's place, and while he brought his own brand of nervous, awkward humor, the chemistry was never the same. Even Moe admitted it. Shemp could be funny, but he wasn't Curly. Audiences felt the shift immediately. The unpredictable, larger-than-life spark that Curly brought could not be replicated. The soul of the Stooges had been dimmed. Meanwhile, Curly's life away from the cameras grew increasingly tragic. The stroke had robbed him of independence, and his condition continued to deteriorate. More strokes followed, each one stripping away another piece of the man who had once been a symbol of laughter. He was shuttled between hospitals and care facilities, and as his physical health declined, his mental state fractured. Reports spoke of his stays in mental institutions, where memory lapses and bursts of confusion left him unrecognizable even to those who had known him best. There were moments of fragile hope. In 1949, Curly made a brief cameo in Malice in the Palace, a fleeting glimpse of the man audiences had loved. But even in those few seconds, the difference was impossible to ignore. The timing was gone, the spark absent. What remained was a shadow of the vibrant performer the world had adored. Moe carried on with the Stooges, keeping the troupe alive through sheer determination. But every slapstick gag, every exaggerated fall, every poke to the eye carried a hidden weight. Behind the laughter, there was a grief Moe rarely allowed himself to speak of. It wasn't until his final years that he finally opened up, breaking his silence to reveal the full measure of Curly's suffering, the warning signs ignored, and the crushing guilt he carried. Because Curly's collapse wasn't simply the story of a man undone by illness. It was a story of a tragedy foreseen but unheeded, one that destroyed not only a career, but a life. But how did a tragedy everyone saw coming still go unanswered? And why was the silence chosen over truth now haunting history forever? Stay right here. A life unraveling in silence when Curly Howard was forced to step away from the Three Stooges in 1946 after his massive stroke. The public clung to a hopeful illusion. Most fans believed their beloved clown was simply resting, recovering, and preparing for a triumphant return to the stage. But behind closed doors, the truth was far more devastating. The man who had once been the heartbeat of comedy was quietly unraveling, his body failing him, his mind breaking piece by piece, while the world looked the other way. Moe later revealed how deeply Curly struggled in those early months. Though paralyzed on one side and robbed of the coordination that had defined his comedy, Curly could not accept that his career was over. He would cry out to Moe, asking when he could return to the act, pleading to believe he was only on pause. Moe admitted that everyone around him knew the harsh reality. Curly would never step onto a set again. Yet his brother's hope, though heartbreaking, refused to die, even as his strength did. The stroke had not only stripped him of his physical power, but had also shaken the very core of his mind. Curly became paranoid, suspicious even of those who loved him most. Depression took hold, deep and suffocating, and with it came destructive habits. His weight soared, his energy collapsed, and his once magnetic personality dimmed into sadness and frustration. The man who had once spun in circles, barked like a dog, and turned chaos into joy now struggled to recognize the life he once lived. Moe remained loyal, not simply as a fellow Stooge, but as a brother who could not abandon him. Yet even he admitted that many visits left him shaken. Looking at Curly was like staring at a stranger wearing his brother's eyes. Every flicker of recognition, every faint smile felt like a miracle, but each passing week made those flickers rarer. Curly's personal life, already turbulent, fell into deeper disarray. He had been married 4 times, but relationships crumbled under the strain of his illness and emotional instability. At times, he could be tender, almost childlike in his sweetness. At others, confusion and bursts of anger would erupt without warning. The instability grew so severe that Curly was eventually institutionalized, with doctors insisting he needed long-term care for both body and mind. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, medical treatment for such conditions offered little comfort. His days became a monotonous rhythm of hospital walls, medications, and caretakers. Through it all, the fans who adored him remained largely unaware. On screen, Moe and Larry pressed forward with the act, carrying the torch of the Stooges' laughter. But in private, Moe admitted he and Larry felt helpless. They were comedians, not doctors, powerless to stop the slow erasure of the man who had once carried their act with boundless vitality. By the early 1950s, the decline was undeniable. Multiple strokes followed, each one stealing another part of Curly. Speech became nearly impossible, and walking unaided was a distant memory. Confusion clouded his thoughts, leaving him fragile and detached from reality. The great showman, who had once commanded stages with larger-than-life antics, could barely hold on to fragments of himself. Yet, even as the end drew near, one small light remained. Whenever Moe visited, Curly would still smile, however faintly. It was a fragile reminder that somewhere inside the broken body and fading mind, the spirit of man who lived to bring laughter still flickered. But as the years crept forward, even that light was dimming, leading inexorably toward a moment that would end Curly's long and private suffering in January. And how did Mo confront Curly's fading light? Was it love, regret, or unbearable guilt shaping his silence all along? Keep watching.